Hello, students. Welcome to the online class once more. Students, do you remember where we left last time? Yes, Prasant now decided to go to Red Cross shelter to find his family members. Now I will read the following paragraphs and then explain them to you. Among the first people he saw in the crowd was his maternal grandmother. Weak with hunger, she rushed to him, her hands outstretched, her eyes brimming. It was a miracle. They had long given him up for dead. Quickly, word spread, and his extended family gathered around him and hugged him tight in relief. Prasant anxiously scanned the motley, battered group. His brother and sister, his uncles and aunts, they all seemed to be there. Students, the meaning of motley, Motley, it's given in your book, disparate, varied in appearance or character. That means changes in appearance or character. While I'll be explaining the paragraphs, it will be clear to you what the word means. So let us start the explanation. Prasant went to the Red Cross shelter and there he saw a crowd, that means a group of people. And in that crowd, he saw his maternal grandmother. Now, who is a maternal grandmother? A grandmother from mother's side is called maternal grandmother. So Prasant saw the mother of his mother, that means his grandmother from his mother's side. She looked very hungry and rushed towards him. Grandmother stretched her hands towards Prasant and her eyes were brimming. Students, this is a very poetic expression, eyes brimming. Now, brim is the edge of a container, that means the last upper part of the container. And when one fills the container from the brim, whatever liquid or whatever solid would overflow or come out. Here, the expression is eyes filled with tears. That means when grandmother saw Prasant, her eyes filled with tears and she thought it was a miracle. Now, students, miracle means wonderful, unbelievable. She thought that Prasan must have died, but he was alive. That was a miracle for grandmother. And very soon, the news of Prasan's coming spread in the crowd, and all who knew him, particularly his family members, gathered quickly to see him. They all hugged him in relief. Here, students, we must understand that all these people were suffering and helpless. So these people were looking for help, and with the arrival of Prasant, there was a sense of relief, particularly in the family of Prasant. Prasant very minutely or meticulously observed the people and their condition. Students, motley, as I referred earlier, means change in appearance or behavior or character. So here, Prasant could see some changes in the characters, particularly the members of his family and other known people. So he was observing the motley and battered group. Battered here actually means unshaped. Battered is a word that is mostly used for non living things, battered cars in accidents or like that. But here, battered is also a poetic beauty which is used for human beings. Battered conditions, very torn out conditions of the people in the Red Cross shelter. Next paragraphs. By the next morning, as he took in the desperate situation in the shelter, he decided to get a grip over himself. He sensed a deadly grief settling upon the 2,500 strong crowd in the shelter. 86 lives were lost in the village. All the 96 houses had been washed away. It was their fourth day at the shelter. So far, they had survived on green coconuts, but there were too few to go around such a tumult of people. Explanation. This is an important paragraph so far Prasant is concerned because now Prasant felt that he had to do something for the people. He passed the night somehow, but in the next morning he saw the situation was really very grave or serious. Then he decided that he had to get a grip over himself. That means he had to be a bit stronger now and start doing something for them. He was able to find some figures. There were near about 2,500 people in the crowd. 86 lives were lost in the flood, and 96 houses had been washed away by the flood water. And those people had been staying in the Red Cross shelter for 4 days till then. They were feeding upon some green coconuts collected, but the number left was very few, and there could be shortage of coconuts in the coming days for such a disorderly, settled people. Students here, tumult means disorderly, settled with great noise and disturbances. Next paragraph. Prasant, all of 19 years, decided to step in as leader of his village if no one else did. He organized a group of youths and elders to jointly pressurize the merchant once again to part with his rice. This time the delegation succeeded and returned triumphantly, wading through the receding waters with food for the entire shelter. No one cared that the rice was already rotting. Branches from fallen trees were gathered to light a reluctant and slow fire on which to cook the rice. For the first time in 4 days, the survivors at the cyclone shelter were able to fill their bellies. His next task was to organize a team of youth volunteers to clean the shelter of filth, urine, vomit, and floating carcasses, and to tend to the wounds and fractures of the many who had been injured. Explanation: Prasant, whose age was 19 years, decided to become the leader if no one else came up. He organized a group of youths and some elderly persons to start the most important part of the job to help everyone. Prasant, along with the other members of the group, went to the merchant through the flood water and came triumphantly. Students, triumphantly means victoriously, because this time they were able to convince the merchant and succeeded in getting rice. They all gathered the branches of the fallen trees and tried to make a fire out of them. Then they cooked the rice, and after a long time, the survivors of the flood could fill their bellies. Bellies means stomach. There must be a great joy among themselves. The next task of the group was to clean the area. So they removed the filth, filth means dirt, urine, vomit, and the dead bodies of animals. They also helped the injured ones by tending to their wounds and fractures. This was a great job initiated by Prasant in helping out all the suffering people of the Red Cross shelter. Next paragraph. On the fifth day, a military helicopter flew over the shelter and dropped some food parcels. It then did not return. The youth task force gathered empty utensils from the shelter. Then they deputed the children to lie in the sand left by the waters around the shelter with these utensils on their stomachs to communicate to the passing helicopters that they were hungry. The message got through, and after that, the helicopter made regular rounds to the shelter, airdropping food and other basic needs. Explanation: On the fourth day, there was a good news. A helicopter was seen flying over them. It also dropped some food parcels, but it did not come again. That was the only one time airdropping food items. So Prasant now tried a game. He told small children to lie upon the ground and put some shining utensils on their stomach. This would attract the helicopter once again. And the game worked. The helicopter caught the sights of these children and came again to drop more food items. In this way, the helicopter made several visits. That was a great success for Prasant. Now they were able to get other basic needs as well. Next paragraph. Prasant found that a large number of children had been orphaned. He brought them together and put up a polythene sheet shelter for them. Women were mobilized to look after them, while men secured food and materials for shelter. As the weeks passed, Prasad was quick to recognize that the women and children were sinking deeper and deeper in their grief. He persuaded the woman to start working in the Food for Work program started by an NGO. And for the children, he organized sports events. He himself loved to play cricket, and so he organized cricket matches for children. Prasant engaged with other volunteers in helping the widows and children to pick up the broken pieces of their lives. The initial government plan was to set up institutions for orphans and widows. However, this step was successfully resisted as it was felt that in such institutions children would grow up without love and the widows would suffer from stigma and loneliness. Prasant's group believed orphans should be resettled in their own community itself, possibly in new foster families made up of childless widows and children without adult care. Students, after getting the basic needs like food and some other items, the next task Prasant took up was to make sure how many of the people had lost their near and dear ones. So he started with children. He found a large number of children without parents. That means all of them were orphans. Maybe that they had lost their parents in the flood or maybe before. So he tried to make a separate shelter for these children with a sheet of polythene. He gave the women of the group to look after the children and to secure food and other materials to the men of the group. In this way, he managed to help the orphans out there. As days passed on, Prasan could feel that there rose the problem of food and other things. So he told the woman to join a program started by an NGO, Food for Work program. Prasad knew that if women would start working, they would obviously be able to gather food. And for the children, he organized sports events. In this way, Prasant was able to at least encourage everyone to restart their life after such a deadly flood devastation. After this, government offered a plan to set up institutions for orphans and widows. But that plan was not successful because That would create more problems in the children and the widows because they would be separated from each other. Children would feel the loneliness and the widows would do the same. Prasant believed that it would be better if those children would be resettled in their own community. Some childless widows could adopt the orphans, and in that way, the children would be under the guidance of parents. That was a brilliant idea, and it also happened in that way. Students, we come to the last paragraph of this beautiful story. Let me move to the last paragraph. Let me read it out and then explain it. It is 6 months after the devastation of the super cyclone. This time, Prasant's wounded spirit has healed simply because he had no time to bother about his own pain. His handsome, youthful faces were the widows and orphaned children of his village seek out most in their darkest hour of grief. So, after 6 months of the super cyclone and its devastation, Prasant did not have time for himself. That means he busied himself for others. And whenever people felt his need, Prasant appeared before them with his youthful face. So, students, that is the end of a beautiful story. Even if it was a fiction, that means the story could be a fictional one, but the incident was a true one. In 1999, Orissa was really hit by a very devastating super cyclone, and the whole state was under emergency. In the pages of history, it would be ever remembered. So, students, let us stop here for today. We will meet again in our next class. Till then, bye.